Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Oil and Gas Rundown here live at King Operating. My name is Rachel Griffith. I'm a Senior Vice President here. And today I have some of our fellow leadership with us that you probably recognize. We have our COO, Steve Mullican, with us. Steve, hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Rachel. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you. And we have our EVP of Geology, Mark Ayers. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Rachel.
All right, so guys, today we are talking specifically about seismic. And really, I want to kind of start off by breaking down, let's talk about what seismic is, and then kind of go into how this technology has really, played a role in the evolution and the change of drilling. So I'm going to first go to Mark and then to Steve. So Mark, tell everybody a little bit, kind of just break down what is seismic, how does it work?
Okay, well, seismic is really, in its simplest, is nothing but listening for echoes in the subsurface, in the ground. So we put some energy at the surface, a lot of different ways of doing it. Sometimes people use dynamite. Sometimes people use big trucks called vibrasize. They have big vibrators that vibrate the ground. And then we listen with little microphones on the ground. We call them geophones. We listen for the return signal coming back, just like you might an echo. And the technology that makes it really work is largely attributed, the way it works so good now is because of the ability for us to use electronics so efficiently. We can record lots and lots of data and now use that data and process it and make much better images than we could, say, in 1950. So, so in the early days, even when I started in the business, which was not that long, I mean, it was in 1980. I guess that seems like a long time now, but to me it's not. But people were just starting to use vibrator trucks, vibrasize. I was at Conoco. They were, I guess, the people that patented the vibrasize. And they were shooting what we called 2D seismic lines. So we would go out and send these. We'd have to get, first off, you have to have you have to have permission to get on a mineral owner's and a surface owner's land before you can actually acquire the data. So the landmen have to go out, acquire permission to allow you to get on the land that you want to evaluate. And then we have surveyors come out. And in those days, we shot one single line at a time, and we recorded the data, brought it back together. We used something called common depth point, and that's different. The old days when we used to record seismic, it was just what I said. We'd thump the ground, and then we'd have a series of arrays around it, and we would listen for when the echoes came back. We call that 100% data. Everything was being recorded and put down. And it was useful, but it really, all you could detect from it was maybe the dip of the beds in the subsurface, but you didn't get a lot of detail. So we go to this new common depth point data, which is actually a fancy way of taking a lot of different signals from different places and combining it back together to amplify it, remove the noise. And we were doing it in single lines. We call that 2D data. It was only in two dimensions depth and the length as we shot it. And then, lo and behold, as computers advanced and the data storage got to the point where we could store incredible amounts of data, we started recording what they called three-dimensional data. And that's sort of the standard these days, three-dimensional data. And that is, we take lots and lots of these geophones on the ground, and we record the signal using the same sort of source material. It may be a vibrator, it might be dynamite, but we record it in a lot of different places. And I'm not a geophysicist, but we can process it, and we get a three-dimensional image of the subsurface. And the one thing that people often, when they look at it, and I'm going to grab you a.
Yes, that's great.
What seismic looks like. And people look at it and they think, oh, there's the beds. And so it's from the surface down. This one's actually in depth. but actually seismic is recorded in time. Just like if you were recording an echo to figure out how far something was away from you, you look at the velocity in the air of the sound wave and how long it takes it to come back to you. That's two-way time. Well, we do that on seismic too. We get two-way time, it's in thousandths of a second, and we have then take it, and then because we know something about how fast the rocks are in the subsurface by drilling wells, that kind of thing, we then turn it into depth, and that's where we can use it. I know that's probably more than you wanted, but I'm trying to find ways. It's really a simple technology, but it is very complicated in the way they process the data.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So no, thank you for explaining that, Mark. Actually, it's very helpful, and your awesome, cool map. Steve, do you have something really cool to show us also? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I won't put you on the spot like that, Steve. Okay, actually, Steve, what I would love to know is kind of talking about, for the time you've been in oil and gas, how you've actually personally maybe seen seismic change, how drilling companies are able to operate, kind of some of the breakthroughs or different examples maybe you've actually seen where seismic came in and played a role.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I always make a joke, since I am an engineer and not a geologist or geophysicist, that the geologists and geophysicists show the engineers the seismic, and they put a lot of really pretty colors on there so that we will react to it. But no, the technology is really pretty phenomenal. I mean, through the years of my career, which is similar to Mark's, I mean, when I started in the 80s, I mean, primarily, it was all what we call 2D seismic. So, I mean, basically it would be one line of seismic that we would be we would correlate other data around with logs and from other well bores, but basically we would just have kind of this one line, and we may take one line that goes east-west and one line that goes north-south, and then we tried to drill off of that. And we tried to actually shoot that line as close to the drillable well that we wanted, we were drilling, to try to make it as accurate as possible. But again, we did only have that. And then when 3D first came out, I mean, it was incredibly expensive. So it took a while for people to take hold. But of course, today it's commonplace and not nearly as expensive it was back in the 80s. But basically it's taking several of these lines is basically a whole grid system to what they try to shoot, so that it gives you that total whether you go east, west, north, south, southwest, northeast, whatever, you kind of have a really good feel for what's there in the formation. And then technology wise, it's the resolution nowadays is just what we can do with computers and data. I kind of, again, sonograms that people have when women are pregnant and you look at the baby, I think of that kind of technology. I mean, when first child my wife and I had, you couldn't tell with a lot of certainty whether it was a male or a female. I mean, they could say, oh, this, that, or the other, but the resolution, nowadays, I mean, it's almost like, they almost have it to where, with the AI and everything, I mean, they basically do a whole picture. I mean, where you can really even like see the face, and not just the image. And I think, that's probably very similar to what's going on with seismic. Mark might correct me, but I think, with the technology and the resolution, it's just so much clearer, for the geophysicists to be able to try to make, better interpretations than what we would have 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's it's pretty remarkable. So what'd you say, Mark?
Well, that's fair, although it's not three-dimensional in the sense that I would say that's more akin to the earlier seismic where you had one source and one receiver. At least as far as I know, at least it's been many years since we had children, but that's what they were using, had a single receiver. They're very good at rebuilding the image. But anyway, one of the things I was going to add that is something we we don't do so much onshore, but offshore people talk about it, and that is direct hydrocarbon indicators. You know, people look at what we do and they think, oh, they got that seismic. Now they know where the oil and gas is. Well, that's really not true. Onshore, at least, we build a structural map. We know where the faults are. We know maybe some changes in the rock character that we think are related to different kinds of lithology. But the reality is we don't see onshore, at least not in my experience, good direct hydrocarbon indicators. Now offshore, because of the ability to determine the phase of the data when it hits from the water into the early, the first arrival you get back to the geophone is from obviously up on the surface of the water. You put the sound down. When you hit the top of the water, the first sediment interface, the seafloor, you get a very distinctive signature. So you know what the polarity is of the data that's coming back to you. And there's probably lots of other reasons why, but because of that, we can actually do things called amplitude versus offset AVO data. We call bright spots, where we think we can tell that there's hydrocarbon because the velocity of the interval that has oil in it's different than one that has water in it. And so it appears different on seismic. Those are called direct hydrocarbon indicators. We don't have the benefit of that as far as my experience is onshore, but boy, 3D data has certainly made it a lot more fun to work. But one thing people have to remember, 3D data, let's say if I was going to go out, Steve says 3D data is cheaper than it was, and that's true. But if I was going to go out into a play, say when we were getting into the Utica or in the Marcellus, and we said 96,000 square miles, well, you couldn't do 3D survey over 96,000 square miles. Nobody could afford to. I mean, so what happens is you have to use 2D data. You have to use other types of seismic and then build your story. Once you get into prospecting, then you get your 3D data where it's more cost effective. But
Okay.
that's probably more than you wanted to know.
Mark, this show is about knowing. So you're sharing all the right information. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of walk through how you use the seismic on the Bivins Ranch. You know, how did you use it? What were you looking at? How did it kind of help you guys make some determinations and estimates and ultimately figure out, you know, where to land that drill site?
Okay, well, is that directed to me? I guess I will answer it then. Yes.
I'll go to you, and my next question is going to go to Steve.
Okay. Well, as far as Bivins, the beautiful thing about Bivins is we have full 3D coverage over the entire block, and that's remarkable. And I think it was 137 square miles of data. I'm trying to remember that correctly. It's all 3D data. It was a lot of this was recorded back in 2014, but it was good quality data, and it's been reprocessed since then. So what can we learn with it? Well, initially we were just looking at structure. In other words, we are drilling long horizontal wells. We want to be sure that we stay and we know that being in the right interval is key to getting the best wells. We had to stay in the right zone. And so 3D seismic helps us remarkably with that. What's happened since then, and this is even more exciting to me, is that the data has been reprocessed. The data we had before was what they called pre-stack time migrated data. And I don't want to get into the details, but we have something now they call pre-stack depth migrated data. But what's neat about it is we can see different sedimentary characteristics in the rock that we couldn't see with the other data set. And so it gives you a much more complex and more accurate story of what the objectives are that you're drilling in. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but we basically want to avoid faults. We want to stay in the zone. We try to stay in a 60-foot zone over a mile or 2 miles. That's not easy to do without having some good definition as to where to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll give this to Steve, and Steve, you can always, if you need to bring Mark in to your question, I get it. But, you know, as our chief operations officer, so, you know, after you guys had the seismic, decided where to drill, put those wells in, you know, what else did you guys learn from that? Did you take anything else from the seismic as far as what worked, what didn't work? Or did you actually learn some new things just from drilling in there in general that maybe you did or didn't see on the seismic?
Well, I mean, we're always kind of trying to fine tune what we're doing with the seismic. I mean, like Mark talked about. I mean, the two different ways that it was processed. Initially we used the time migration, and now with the depth migration and a little bit more geophysical and petrophysical work that we're potentially going to be doing here in the future, we'll be able to even more accurately uh, drill in the zones that and understanding what we're drilling in is staying in. So, I mean, it's kind of a moving, it's always improving. And, I think, Mark and his team do a great job in doing that.
Yeah, they do. I've heard Mark say a few times, we're always learning. We're always learning, which I hope everyone is always learning. So I want to kind of switch here now and talk about when you don't have seismic. What, Mark, when you're going to work in an area, specifically, some of the areas in Mid-Con and all that, and you don't have seismic, how do you guys make those determinations?
Right. Well, that's a good question, Rachel. The reality there is we have a lot of vertical wells drilled there, and we don't have seismic accessible in the prospects because we don't need it there. We have enough vertical wells to tell us where the zones are that we're drilling for. And on top of that, we actually have what we call, we've talked about these electric logs before, but remember we talked about it like these are straws we put in the ground or our wells. It's like putting a straw in a birthday cake, and then you pull it out and you look at it and you can see the different characteristics of the birthday cake. Well, we do that in the subsurface, but we run a tool down the hole that records different electrical signals. And remember, Steve used to do that when he first got into this business. He was doing that. So we take that information and then we build the model of where we want to drill, where we want to land the wells, where we think the best areas to be based on that information. So, and I wanted to back up on something because we talk about we're always learning, Rachel, and that's a positive thing. I agree. But when we talk about Bivins or our Mid-Con, we're in areas that we know are going to produce oil and gas. There are a lot of places in my career that I've drilled wells that I couldn't say that. And so, there were times when I was working for some other companies like Conoco or Hunt that we were out looking for things that might only have a 2 to 5% chance of working. But it didn't mean we didn't want to drill them. We thought they were great ideas. We just couldn't be certain of what was going to happen. The stuff we're doing on Bivins, we know we're in an oil and gas field. We're just trying to find the best way to optimize that recovery by finding the best place to land the wells with our seismic and with our well data we have. In the Mid-Con, we know where we have the best wells, and we are using the vertical well data because we don't have seismic, and we don't really need seismic there. Otherwise, we would try to buy it. But whether it's available, I don't know. But we have enough data with the wells that we know where the formations are in the subsurface, and so we can drill the horizontal in that using the maps we made from those existing vertical wells. So.
No, that's great. I want Steve to talk a little bit more about his other job and what Mark talked about. Elaborate on that.
Well, when I was first out of college, way, way long ago, anyway, I started out for a wireline service company. It was actually a part of Halliburton at the time. It was called WellX. And what we did, I worked as what was called an open hole field engineer. So basically, going out there, the tools that Mark talks about, those were kind of they're investigative tools that people use, and we still use them today. The technology, again, has not greatly changed, again, but the resolution and the computer side of things have allowed those resolutions to get better. But basically, we put tools in the hole that, do either electrical or induction type impulses into the formation. You basically get kind of a bunch of squiggly lines back, and there's also like a gamma ray tool where it's reading the natural radiation of the formation, which can tell you whether you're shells or sandstones. And then there's also more in-depth radioactive tools called a density and a neutron tool, which will basically help you see what the porosity of the rock will be and things of that nature. So that's how, back in the early 80s, and I mean, and still today, people utilize those logs to be able to determine a lot in the formation. But also what I tell people, with that type of investigation, we're talking about going a few feet out away from a 5 or 10-inch, 12, 15-inch wellbore. And so there's a lot of extrapolation that has to be done. And so, if you do have a lot of well density, you can do what's called correlation. And, but formations change very quickly. And that's where, again, where in some areas, especially when you have seismic and things of that way, it just helps. It helps that that interpolation be a little more accurate. But yeah, that was my initial career, and it's I saw many sunrises during that time. It's because we used to joke around that no open hole log was ever logged during the daylight. It was always seemed like it was at nighttime. And I'm sure Mark in his early career as a geologist, sat out on the wells with the field engineer, because that's typically the company man that would be out there on a wireline service job like that would typically be the company geologist.
Yeah, that was fun because you got to be the first one to know whether or not it was a dry hole or a producer. Yeah. I like being out there. It was worth staying up all night.
Okay, so explain to me, why are you staying up all night?
Well, because staying up on it, but basically, these tools take about, depending on the depth and stuff, they can take, anywhere from a short job was probably a 4-hour job to sometimes, I was on one job for almost 50 hours once. So it's just, you have to pull them very slowly, and there's several different runs that you make. And so it just takes time. So.
Gotcha. So that was Mark. I know that's probably amazing actually to sit out there. I know I saw Steve on site, and I'm telling you, that man gets excited when he's in a drill set.
Yeah, it's a fun industry. I started out in the field on the production operations side, and always, it's fun to be out in the field. I being in the office sometimes is hard to do, so it is exciting to get out there directly.
No, it is. It is beautiful out there too. So just to kind of wrap this up, Mark, I just want to ask you, where do you see, throughout your career, obviously seismic technology, all these things have changed a lot over the years. Do you see another pattern of growth over the next decade and how technology might change in drilling as far as with the geology and what you guys are learning and discoveries?
Well, Rachel, I think inevitably that's going to happen because we still need to look for hydrocarbons, and I think where we'll see more advances are going to be, like I talked about when we're doing exploration work, where you cannot afford to have seismic. In some countries, you wouldn't even be able to get there because it would be so heavily forested. And so we use remote sensing devices, magnetics. We can look at gravity data and even some direct hydrocarbon indicators, and then come up with targets. These are exploration targets, not the kind of thing we're drilling at King, but that's where I think we'll see advances. And constantly, the way we reprocess seismic that is existing, people are always coming up with new techniques. One of the biggest ones that we don't deal with anymore, and I actually went to school and still couldn't explain it, is how to image underneath salt domes. In the Gulf of Mexico, some of the huge fields that have been discovered out there are underneath this Luan salt, big, thick salt. Well, when I told you, you don't really, when you're seeing the signal coming back on seismic, it's time, not depth. Well, since salt has a very different velocity than the rocks around it, you have to be able to correct the travel time through that salt and image what's underneath it. And being able to do that is remarkable. And that's one reason why we've had some of the big companies have made such huge discoveries in the Gulf of Mexico, is they've been able to drill what's called subsalt. And they actually are drilling for structures underneath the salt that before we could have never even imaged, and we can't. So seismic and the way that we evaluate it is going to keep evolving, I'm sure, also.
Yeah, I can imagine. Steve, any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure AI is also starting to play a much bigger role in drilling as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, in a lot of different areas. I mean, the rigs themselves, are becoming more automated than what we've seen. A lot of electronics on rigs that we haven't seen before. I mean, I'm sure AI will continue to have a big impact. And, it's like anything else with technology. I mean, we can all sit here and think technology has maxed out in a particular era, and it never does. It just continues to push forward. So, in my career, I've gone from, slide rule to, basically having a computer now that runs circles around, the huge Cray computers that first came out, in the 70s that, filled rooms of, filled a whole, floor of an office, with the computer processing. So it's come a long way.
Come a long way. Well, yeah, you're not that old, but yeah, sure, it's come a long way. No, it really has. So, well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on the live with me today, and everybody who's watching, whether live or on a replay, thank you for joining us. Please make sure to go over to kingoperating.com if you would like to learn more about opportunities we have for investors to look at direct drilling programs that we offer at King Operating, and just how we help our investors save their money with their tax deductions, build that monthly revenue, and look for opportunity for growth inside their portfolio. We would love to have a conversation or send you out some more information. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next Wednesday at the same time. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rachel.
Have a good day.
Bye.